We're going to talk to Patrick. Hi, Patrick. Thanks for calling the Atheist Experience. You're talking to Shannon and Jim.
Hi, how are you all doing today?
Great. Great. Now that you're here, what can we talk to you about today?
I wanted to make the distinction between like a personal God and a natural God. Kaku talked about this, the faith of Einstein. He said Einstein made the distinction between a personal God of, like, say, Christianity and his version of a God, which was the universe and this pantheism, and talk about how perhaps it relates to panpsychism.
Okay, so what relevance does that have? Do you believe, is that a God that you believe in?
I think that, yes, I believe that the universe may be shown to have like what we would consider God attributes, but I'd like to get back to that in a minute if I can. Right now, I'd like to, just focus on that, the distinction between the two, because one is a philosophy predicated on, possible science to back it up, I believe, in pantheism, where religion just because they say so, it's not predicated upon any philosophy. And with panpsychism and pantheism, there is no dogma there. There is no religion. There is no churches. There are no Bibles. It's not a dogma at all. So I would ask you all, what would the atheists have a problem with that claim? Because, see, the atheists claim, I believe,
there are no gods. So we don't believe in gods.
You know what I mean? It's saying, so how do you come to that conclusion that for sure, because I've heard Matt Dillahunty say before, he said there is no science evidence of God. How can you be sure of that?
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there just because there's already a lot of content to address in what you just said. So I'm going to stop you there for just 1 second because there's already 15 things to address and I want to kind of start from the top. So you said that atheists believe that there is no God, right? So it seems to me...
No evidence either. I got you. Yeah. Bad, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's totally fine. No evidence for God or believe there is no God. Sure, fine, whatever. Fine. You say that there is evidence for a pantheistic God. So let's focus on that. So what is the evidence for a pantheistic God that should make me believe in it? Because you seem to think, or at least you're asserting from what I can tell, that there would be no reason for me not to believe in a pantheistic God, because science and philosophy lean towards it and point in that direction. And that's why you've come to that conclusion. So instead of, speculating about why an atheist is a monolith, which they aren't, do and don't believe in things, why don't you and I and Jim have a conversation about why we should be pantheists and what convinced you?
Okay, well, for example, like, I look up to, this may be an argument from, the appeal to an authority figure, but Einstein, Tesla, a lot of these guys were experts on the universe. Kaku said he saw wisdom in the God of Einstein. And I think what he means by that is he says the universe, I don't know that he uses the term fine-tuned, but he said it's elegant, it's conducive to life, and it doesn't have to be that way because physics shows us it could just be a random collection of protons and electrons or whatever. Something to that effect. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to purport to say that I am.
I'm going to stop you for 1 second again because you said a couple of important things there that I want to address before we get too bogged down in elaborative minutia. So you said, I asked you directly for your reasons for why you believe in God, in this particular version of God, and your reasons seem to boil down to you think Einstein and Tesla were incredibly smart, and this, from your conceptualization, is the version that they seem to believe in. Thus, it would follow that if you see them as smart, even though you don't have any reasons yourself, you would believe it too?
Well, that's some part of it. They were expert, like, on the properties of the universe. That being their God, they were expert on their God. Einstein was an expert on his version of God. So
there's physicists who are Christians. So does that mean that you should be a Christian? There's astrophysicists who are myriad faiths. Should you just find somebody who you perceive as smart and believe the faith that they believe simply because they're smart about something like cosmology or astrophysics?
Well, they showed, you know, let me get into why I believe pantheism is correct.
Perfect.
Besides Einstein and all these geniuses that, you know.
Sure.
But, so I believe there may be what we could consider God attributes.
Okay.
And some of those are congruent. These are all God guesses because we don't know what property. Only God would know what God was, right? You know, only God could be able to define him. No human could really define a God, right?
So you believe in a God that you don't know the definition of?
Unless you were God yourself, then you might be able to define yourself as God. But
so I'm going to stop you again because you said you don't know the definition of the God that you believe in. So you're saying that I don't know what God is, but there's a loose definition somewhere, and I'll hold to that.
Like, let me give you one of my guesses. Like, God would be, I believe, an attribute of God would be a conscious God. That links to pantheism, panpsychism, which many prominent scientists now espouse that might be true, that the universe could. What it says essentially is that
the problem with
pervades the universe.
Right. The problem with assigning intelligence to Spinoza's God is that Spinoza is fairly explicit in that God has no intelligence. I mean, he doesn't have feeling, doesn't have will.
Different than Spinoza's. My version would be different than Spinoza's. I have my own form of pantheism, but I think, like I say, there's like three main attributes that God may exhibit: without beginning or end, a conscious, and the origin of all other things in existence. Those would be.
And how would you prove any of that?
God attributes.
What does without beginning or end actually mean?
It's infinite. Like the cyclical universe model of science depicts an infinite universe. Einstein introduced that as well.
Well, that's one possibility that, but nobody really knows. We're still looking for evidence. So that is merely a hypothesis, right?
That's why this is all debatable. I'm saying I'm more agnostic. You know, I'm unsure. But I like this pantheism idea, and I like Kaku. I see wisdom in the God of Einstein, you know, being that, you know, so much about the universe is unknown at this time. We may discover properties that may depict it, you know, a lot like God has been described, maybe perhaps not a personal God. You know, it's different. It's not a God you pray to for that new bike for Christmas.
Right. But, so I guess I have a couple questions. One, what good does this God do, and what does belief in him do? And two, how do you prove he actually exists? What is your evidence that this actually exists?
Good questions.
Well, that's what I would ask the atheist. What is the proof God doesn't exist? Because that's the same stance, you know.
No. I'm going to stop you there for a second, Patrick, because that's a shift on purpose. You called in to have a conversation with us about the God that you believe in, and you've already kind of given up the goat that you don't actually have a specific definition. You're kind of working based on observation and then creating this sort of like loose aggregate of what you think a God may be, because you feel as though it has these three attributes of being infinite, conscious, and oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot the other one. Infinite and conscious. What was the third?
Let's just keep it real simple. God is the creator of everything in existence.
Okay. Okay.
The origin of everything in existence.
Okay. So we'll keep that simple. So you think that God is the origin of everything in existence, and you're basing this on what? Like what? You, Peter, not Einstein, not Tesla, not what? Like when you look at the definition of God, you said you like what you've already admitted that you don't actually have a real definition of God, other than you think it maybe has 3 attributes, and one of those is that it was the creator of everything. So you don't obviously worship the God, it doesn't sound like. It seems as though you're attempting to look at the world around you and construct an idea of God that might fit your observations, and then sort of loosely adhering to it as a general idea. And my question to you would be, why? Like, why do you even need to do that? For what conceivable reason?
That's why I ask you the question, why would the atheist? Because it's the same thing. It's the same question in reverse you're putting on me.
No, answer my question. See, this is what I love. I love dissecting rhetorical strategies. So you may have made an error in judgment here, because what you're doing is when you're met with something that you can't actually answer or just assert over me, you're attempting to turn the tables to say, well, you can't prove God doesn't exist. Well, the problem with that is that you actually haven't even presented a definition of God. We've attempted to get you to present a definition of God, but you yourself have admitted that you don't even have one. It's potentially just a loose one. I can refute individual components of what you've said. I can tell you why I don't believe individual components of what you said, but I can't refute a God with a definition that you haven't presented. So why don't you give me your definition of God, which we've asked for a couple of times, and I will tell you why I do or don't believe in it. Because if it is a good one, if it is a solid one, if it is philosophically and scientifically accurate, based on intellectual honesty, I will be forced to adhere to it. So here's your chance, Patrick. Give me a definition of God.
I did say that. I said the origin of all other things in existence.
That's just an assertion. That's not a definition. You're just asserting that there is something that was the origin of all things in existence. That's an attribute, not a definition. And you have no proof for that. It is just an assertion. The reason I don't believe you is because I don't believe unfounded assertions.
How can you say that's not a definition? How can you say that's not a definition?
Because it needs to have other attributes other than just created the universe. So your definition of God is, so this is your distilled definition of God then, right? Is that created the universe. There is no other component to it. The only thing about it is that it created the universe. It does not need to exist within the universe. It does not need to exist within time. It does not need to have any consciousness. It just needed to create the universe. That in and of itself is your definition. And I reject that because it's unfounded. There's no evidence for it and it's not required.
There's no evidence for it. See, that's again, how do you get to no evidence? How can you tell? What would we be looking for to evidence this God you speak of?
You're the one speaking of it.
You're the one making a claim. You've got the burden of proof.
You have to know what you're looking for.
You have to know what created the universe, and you don't. You're just asserting that you do. Nobody knows what created the universe or if it was even created.
And your definition of whoever created the universe actually fits most of the Big Bang models. So, and none of those posit a God. So your God could just be the natural.
My God. The ultimate definition is God equals the universe. That's the definition. If you want,
you're just defining God into existence at this point. You must recognize that, Patrick. You're just saying that God is a synonym for the universe. So whatever attribute the universe has, God has. It's a one-to-one correlation. God equals universe. So why do you even need to have the word God there? We already have a universe. Why do you need to relabel it God? Why do you need to say the universe is also simultaneously God and God is simultaneously the universe? Why do we need to have two names for the universe? Just say universe.
After God did. God is actually, that word came before the universe, did it not?
The word, so now you're just playing semantics based on when, like, etymology. So you're just saying when words are created is what equals truth. And I don't know the answer to that. And even if I did, even if the word God existed before the word universe existed, that would just be evidence that our conceptualization of the universe happened as we learned more about what the universe is. I don't even know if it is true. And that our conceptualizations of God in our imagination, as I see it, occurred prior to that. And that's evidence of nothing other than etymology is something. Like there's words that exist now that didn't exist 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. That's
say the universe for a fact isn't God. I want to know how you come to that claim.
Because you're just renaming the universe God. If you want to call the universe God, Patrick, you go right ahead. I'm not going to stop you, but it solves and proves nothing. It's just you renaming the universe God and acting like that's a mic drop. If I want to rename the universe Charlie and then ask you to prove Charlie doesn't exist, that's a me problem, not a you problem.
Right. Well, and we're not making the opposite claim. We're asking you to prove yours.
Like God has been described of religion, and then it's you know, if it's cyclical, it's infinite, you know, and that's one possibility. You're acting like it's not even a possibility.
No. We are simply asking you to make your case, and you're not doing it. You have the burden of proof. We're not accepting what you've offered so far. We're not making the opposite claim.
I know. That's the thing. The atheist accepts no possible God claims.
Not true.
So you all have studied every religion on earth and any God claim, I'd imagine, right?
Okay, Patrick, now you're getting frustrated, I think, because what you're putting on us is if you are not currently aware of every conceivable definition of God that or conceptualization of God that has ever existed throughout the history of humanity or is available in the universe, then you can't be an atheist because you just can't, because you have to default to believing in something you don't believe in because it hasn't been present. Like it starts to fall apart when you analyze it that way, Patrick. You're asking me to believe in something I don't because what? I haven't been exposed to it yet? I'm an atheist because I don't believe in any God claim. I've never seen a definition of God that is even remotely tenable to me. Everybody who I have a conversation with about these types of things seems to revert back to rhetorical strategies in order to not even address the things that they already say, which is something that you've done multiple times in this conversation, and no one can present a coherent definition. And if they could, I would be forced intellectually to adhere to it. So please provide me a coherent definition that isn't just A, God equals the universe, or B, it created the universe.
All right, I'm going to read 2 sentences from the Scientific American. In our standard view of things, consciousness exists only in the brains of highly evolved organisms, and hence consciousness exists only in the tiny part of the universe. Now, panpsychism, consciousness pervades the universe and is a fundamental feature.
But you have no evidence of that.
And it also contradicts your quote.
Yeah, it also contradicts your quote.
It directly contradicts the quote you just read.
You have less evidence for panpsychism than you do for pantheism.
You just literally refuted yourself.
You are dogmatic atheist. You will accept no possibility of any.
Oh, Patrick, I really wish that you would listen to what we're saying.
You haven't presented any evidence.
What about the Satanic Atheist Church? That's a dogma.
Oh, okay, Patrick,
right,
goodbye.
Bye, Patrick. Have a nice day.
Okay, have a nice day. Helped. All right, that was okay. All righty then. Well, that was. I thought that might slide into productivity, but apparently, one person in this conversation was very dogmatic and wasn't willing to have.
Right.
All righty then.